welcome to the Aid Station. I'm Chris Robb, and today I'm really excited to be catching up with someone who's become a good friend since we met at the World Athletics Running Conference in China a couple of years ago. We're joined today by Ashish Bhushan, who's the founder and CEO of Chapter 3 Technologies. He's joining us from Mumbai in India. Ashish, always wonderful to see you. Thanks for making the time.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me here. It's always great interacting with you in all such sessions. So thank you.
Yeah, look, really excited to have the opportunity to chat to you. Obviously, I know a lot about you, but I'm sure the audience is going to find your journey amazing and truly inspirational in terms of, you know, the kind of pivot that you've made, particularly in recent years, to bring an amazing concept to the market. But why don't we start by hearing a little bit of your background, please?
Yeah, sure. So like you said, Chris, I'm based in Mumbai. I was born in Delhi, in New Delhi, but I was told I was about 40 days old when my parents got me to Bombay. So I've ever since been in this city, and grew up in a North Indian household. My dad was always a marketing professional, and that's where some of my early inspiration in my career came from, marketing, advertising, and so on. With that, during my college days, I was in colleges in Mumbai, done my post-graduation here. I was always sort of, thanks to my dad's background, involved in events, various sporting events, fashion shows, all sorts of things, as a young kid in my undergrad program. And then that really became the reason for me to step out and start my career in advertising. So I started off with agencies like Leo Burnett, and then with J. Walter Thompson. So that was really the initial part of my career, client servicing, media planning. Of course, it used to be very different in those years, but it was a good sort of foundation setting. I believe advertising is a great way to begin your career. It sort of does the grill for you that is needed in later on years. And then post that, I moved on to Accenture. I was with Accenture for many years, handling India, Middle East. I was involved in Africa, did a lot of work in Europe. And that's where I think, it was a good exposure for a advertising executive to get sort of some global exposure, global play. And Accenture was a fantastic organization. I think, can't thank them enough. And then for almost 10 years, I was with the Times of India Group, which is the largest media house in the country. In fact, it has the world's largest English newspaper called the Times of India, the second largest read business newspaper called the Economic Times, and so on. And, the last 3 years in Times of India, I was with Brand Capital, where I saw so many entrepreneurs. And I said, if others can do it, maybe I want to also jump out. And that's how, Chapter 3, my current organization, was created about 6 years ago. So that's just a little bit of background for me.
Wow, what a great story. And it's amazing how I discover new things. Never realized, that statistic about the Times of India in terms of its readership, which I guess if you think about it makes perfect sense with a massive population like India has. And you've been involved obviously in the industry in terms of working on the Tata Mumbai Marathon as well. So, an amazing event. And we caught up there back in 2019, which is the last time that the event was run. And then, for obvious reasons, we had this big pause. How's things in India now? There's events starting to come back, but what's life like generally, and what's keeping you busy at the moment?
Yeah, so Chris, Tata Mumbai Marathon also happened in 2020. So in January is when it happened. And then, of course, the pandemic sort of, came in around March. So it's been great, right? I mean, I have been associated for a few years with ProCam, and clearly with the Tata Mumbai Marathon, the Delhi Half Marathon, the TCS World 10K Bengaluru, as well as the Tata Steel 25K in Kolkata. I think ProCam is a pioneer in the space of distance running in India. And it was great for me to sort of, get that firsthand exposure of seeing such large, events bringing sort of different communities together. Things have been tough. Of course, that's true globally, and therefore India is no different. They have been difficult in the last 2 years. That said, slowly things are looking up. So Procam hosted the TCS World 10K in Bengaluru last Sunday, in fact, just 2 days ago. And that is in many ways a restart of, the running sort of events of this stature. Clearly, as we go towards the end of the year, all the other bigger events will also be back. Uh, Maybe some formats will change. Maybe the industry will come back in a slightly, different sort of structure, the way they create these events and deliver these events. So I think it's a moment where the industry is learning a lot, and it will have to think of new business models, new way to retain and grow their customer base, and so on. So that's as far as the events in India is concerned. I have been, for the last year particularly, completely focused on ActHive, which is a social well-being platform, that something that I was very keen to do for many years, and that's something I put into motion, last year, and that's really something that I'm completely busy with right now.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. Tell us a little bit about Active. It looks to me like it's something that's going to create some real ripples in the industry, and a great platform for communities and health and well-being. Just a couple of minutes on Active.
Yeah, so Chris, this started the seed of this idea came in many years ago during my early part of the entrepreneurial journey, where I had hosted an event or a series of events called as Run for Your Campus. And that's where, in many ways, I think the journey started, where the idea was to really work along with educational institutions, particularly the large ones, like the Indian Institute of Technology, Indian Institute of Management, and so on, and then use their campus infrastructure to be able to create, running events, bring alumni, students, the industry at large, etc. So while I think it was a good idea, but it was sort of anchored in a lot of commercial constraints, given the physical event nature of what I was trying to achieve then. So I pretty much parked it at that point, saying maybe the need is there, but when I'm able to do a technology and a digital first approach, I will come back to this. That was one. Of course, along the way, then I took to running myself, something I thought I could never do. And when in my first half marathon, I did a sub 2, I think that felt really good. Uh, and somewhere I saw how running has been a social event. And my own observation and view has been that if we take a technology first approach to creating a social well-being platform, which is what Active is, where people are able to come in and create, community fitness events for various stakeholders for theirs, right? So it could be organizations doing it for their employees, educational institutions doing it for their alumni, NGOs doing it for fundraising purposes, and so on. So that's really been the journey of Active, where it started, and I'm glad that I took that path, because it is early days, but we are seeing good initial traction. So that's been encouraging.
Wonderful, so much validation, and you were talking to me in a call a few weeks ago, and it was a real kind of aha, which you've obviously had, is that we're all parts of all these different cohorts. You've touched on one of them. We're an alumni of a university, of a school. You're an alumni in your case of Times of India and Accenture, and what a great opportunity potentially in a running or a walking sense to bring these communities together to promote interaction and health and well-being. As this industry that is going through challenging times evolves, my sense is that the kind of thing you're creating is going to have a huge role. And obviously it's challenging times for the industry right now in many parts of the world. And as you've gone on this entrepreneurial journey, Ashish, I'm sure there's been plenty of challenges. I'd love you just to share with us a few of what those biggest challenges might have been, and any tips you might have for how you've overcome them.
Yeah, so I think clearly there have been challenges, and I feel one of the biggest challenges has been to pretty much sort of upgrade and update my own line of thinking, right? In terms of taking a technology and a digital first approach. Of course, I've been in advertising, marketing, content, and so on. But as this idea sort of started to take shape, I was very clear that I needed to have a steep learning curve in terms of understanding what the technology game is, how is that played? It's a completely different and a very exciting world. So that has been something, of a challenge for me personally, to be able to, keep pace with all of it. Other than that, I think I wouldn't call it a challenge, but really the challenge come opportunity is in translating your vision into a product. It's good to sort of have a long-term vision, but when the product gets built, that's when the true test happens, and that happens based on so much input and feedback from people, customers, users, and so on. So it's navigating through all of those things to ultimately give your vision a shape of a product is what I think is a very exciting challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that's kind of gone on a windy journey as you've got different pieces of feedback. And sometimes the challenge in those situations is, if you take on every bit of feedback, you end up tying yourself in knots. Any tips of how you've been able to say, okay, this is all the feedback I've gathered. How do I stay kind of true to the core and the purpose here?
Yeah, so I think we've been very clear that this is a community first approach to fitness, to wellness, right? Obviously, there are so many large players out there that are in the individual performance space, your distance, your time, your calories, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they do a fantastic job of it. Clearly, that's not the space where I was keen to go with Active. And that is where a large part of the effort for me is to almost be very disciplined about the community first nature of what we are trying to build here. There are temptations to add features which take you away from that, but because it's a good thing to do. But I think it's always about just staying on the path and actually delivering what the differentiation and the positioning is. I have to admit it's not easy to sort of deal with those temptations, but that's part of the game, right?
No, absolutely, and I guess that's a kind of a nice segue into what I always like to speak about as part of the aid station, and that's leadership. As leaders have to kind of get this balance of listening to feedback, but also being true to their beliefs and their understanding of a particular situation. I'd love you just to talk about leadership generally, any principles that you apply. You've clearly been a leader in many different spheres, in your corporate sphere, and now obviously as an entrepreneur taking a leadership approach to health and well-being. What are some of the principles and any tips you would give people that are kind of on the early stages of a leadership journey or far down the track even?
Yeah, so I think this is just I'm also learning about leadership. So this is just my experience I'm talking about. But one of the situations I've always found myself in, and I have to say that I can't take credit for it, is always being in a place where one has to create something ground up. In hindsight, when I look back at my career, and to be honest, not all of it was engineered by me. It just happened that way. But I find myself, whether it's a large organization that I've been part of or my own entrepreneurial journey, it's really about creating something ground up. So I think that is one of my own learnings, that if you are trying to sort of, go down a path where you've got ideas, you've got, vision, you're making efforts in that direction, then clearly having a plan to make that happen is what's important. I think that's something I have learned from many other people who in front of me have created something out of thin air and they've made sustainable businesses out of it. I've been very inspired by them, and I think that's one very important aspect of leadership in my view.
Yeah, and I guess you talk about, thank you for sharing that, you talk about being inspired by others. So the role of mentors there, my sense is that you have a number of mentors that support you. Can you maybe talk briefly about that mentorship space?
Yeah, so I have again been very lucky to have worked with some of the industry leaders, whether it was my days in Accenture, or the Times of India, or even with Procam, clearly the brothers Anil Singh, Vivek Singh, they are thought leaders in their own space, and I think uh, I think we all need mentorship at different points of time in our lives, right? Um, and it's really people who can contribute to where you are at what stage of the journey you're in. So that's been very exciting, and again, these people they've come at the right time in my life, so I'm very grateful for them.
Wonderful. It seems to me like there's been so much amazing synchronicity in your life, and often I think you put things out, and it's amazing how often they come to you. And clearly, you've inspired a lot of people, and will continue. And always on the aid station, I love to talk about something inspirational. Have you got an inspirational story you'd like to share to round things off, please, Ashish?
Yeah, Chris, I used to work with one of the leaders in the Times of India group, Dr. Bhaskar Das, my earlier boss. And he would be the one who, despite it being a very, very large organization, how he was able to spot individuals who have great ideas and support them all the way. It's not always easy in a large organization to actually let people pursue their ideas, because there are so many templates and frameworks. But I think an inspirational story of his is really about, how do you spot talent, how do you spot the right ideas, how do you give them the room to sort of get a life of its own, and support it till they become sustainable, scalable, viable businesses. So that's something that always stands out for me.
So he's inspired those people within the organization who've gone on to be entrepreneurs. Because you mentioned that when we were talking about Times of India, that you had this opportunity to see so many entrepreneurial journeys around you and start out, and there you are. What a great way to kind of wrap that up. That you've now ended up being one of those inspirational entrepreneurs that is going to inspire and impact the lives of many others. Ashish, always wonderful to catch up with you. Wish you all the very best with Active and the other projects that you're working on. And certainly, I know our paths are going to continue to cross.
A pleasure. Thank you once again for having me here, Chris.
Thanks, Ashish.